Hi, my name is Raymond Williams and welcome to my video on Ohm's Law. Now, a couple things I want to point out before I get started. First of all, I'm nervous as hell, so please just bear with me. And the other one is that the math that you're going to be seeing here is really simple. It's 7th grade math. And I'm going to say that a couple times over, and over and over and over. Well, I'm going to say it a lot of times because it is simple. And the things you'll be learning, it's just like learning a new city or a new school. You go to a new school, you learn where your homeroom class is, your other classes, where the cafeteria is at, how to get to school, what bus to ride. And before long, it's all automatic. And then you start learning the fine details. Before you know the whole school. Same way with town. You move to a new town. You figure out where you're gonna live at, where you're gonna work. Where you're gonna get your food from, and then eventually you know the whole place. So this is the same way. So just bear with me. So let's get to it. Now we're gonna be using three quantities in this section, in all the DC section. This is direct current. So the first one we're going to be doing, and you all have heard of this, I'm sure, but it's represented by the letter E. It's voltage. And the unit that we work with is volts. And at the end of it, if you have 10 volts, let's call it 10 volts. And you put V in the back, 10 volts. Now, you'll also be working with millivolts. And almost everything that we're going to do at this point is going to be in volts and millivolts. Once in a while, you're going to use microvolts, which is the Greek letter mu, the V. And that's going to be the, and if you're not used to working with submultiples like that, you're going to get used to it. And that's what is I. And I want to point out that it's not my choice to use these letters to represent these values. The work that, on Ohm's law and electricity in general, the early work was done in Europe. And not by English speakers neither. So I is current. And that's going to be in amps. And so it's like 10 amps. And likewise, most of what you're going to be working with is going to be thousandths of an amp. And so that'd be like milliamps. We were trying to talk about microamps from time to time. You're not going to be measuring stuff that low. It's becomes difficult to measure low currents and low voltages. So almost everything being milliamps, and most of what we're going to be working with is being volts and millivolts, and then resistance, and that is the R for resistance. And that's going to be in ohms. And most of what you'll be working with are multiples of ohms. So you're going to see it in ohms. Well, okay, let's say omega is a symbol you can use. But you're going to work in ohms and you're working in kilo ohms. But you have k-ohm, kilo ohms, thousands of ohms. When we're trying to talk about, ohms and maybe mega ohms, but what's everything being kilo ohms? And so there you go. Now let's get to Ohm's law itself. And the relationship is the current in a circuit is equal to the voltage over the resistance. And that's it. Wow, you know, that looks like really hard math, doesn't it? A fraction. Now, what I like to do to remember it, to this day, I've been at this for 30 years plus. So, but to remember Ohm's law, I multiply both sides by R. So, you know, I go like this: the current equals the voltage over the resistance. I multiply both sides by R. I cancel, and I end up with the voltage equals the current times the resistance. So we're going to have circuits where you're not going to know the voltage, but all you have is current and resistance. To solve it, that's your relationship right there. Pretty straightforward. And then likewise, if you punch around a little bit, you'll end up with the resistance in the circuit is equal to the voltage over the current. You know, so I don't expect you to remember this. You make a cheat sheet. You know, on that cheat sheet you put the E is a voltage. It's in volts. This is how we express it, 10 in a V. And we normally work in volts and millivolts and sometimes microvolts. I is the current. It was in amps. And we work in maybe amps at this point. You're not gonna don't expand with amps at this juncture. But you can be working in milliamps and possibly microamps. We're probably going to talk about microamps. And then the resistance, we're going to be talking in ohms, and we're going to talk in kiloohms. That's basically what you're going to be working at. We may actually do some experiments later on with mega ohms. And I will do some with small fractions of ohms later on when we start talking about meters and stuff like that. But just write down that the resistance is ohms, and we're working in ohms and kiloohms at this point. And then write down these three, you know, simple identities right here, and we're good to go. So, you know, pause it right now, and then start it again, and we're going to start working some simple problems. Alright, so here we go. I mean, you really can't get much simpler than this. We got a single cell, a 1 volt cell, and this is the symbol for a cell. This is the schematic symbol for a resistor, interconnected via wires. And when you apply, as you heard from my earlier video, you should remember this, that when you put a resistance across a voltage, a current will flow. And the current is going to flow from negative to positive. And as hopefully you all know by now, my hero, Benjamin Franklin, had a 50-50 shot at getting polarities right. He didn't have any way to analyze the situation, to detect the flow of electrons, so he got it wrong. But I really admire that man. So you have a current flowing. So now we're going to apply Ohm's law. Now what do we have here? We have the voltage and we have the resistance. And we have the voltage and resistance. So we're looking for the current. So the current is the voltage over the resistance. So that is equal to 1 volt over 1 ohm. 1 over 1 is 1. So we have 1 amp. Pretty straightforward. Not a big deal. So, now we're going to take and get closer to reality here. Alright, I've never seen, other than like a Daniel cell, which you're not going to run into nowadays. In fact, the Daniel cell is what the original definition of a volt was. So that's how a volt became a volt back in the early 1800s. But we're used to working with, alkaline batteries and before that dry cells, and they're 1.5 volts roughly. So once again, we got 1.5 volts. It's going through 1 ohm. The current's going from negative to positive, and we got 1.5 over 1. And of course, anything over 1 equals whatever it is. So we have 1.5 amps. So, and I'm going to work with voltages and resistor values that you can go and pick up at Radio Shack. In fact, your experimenting will be done on breadboards, hopefully. And you're going to use little quarter-rod resistors, which you can still get from Radio Shack. I don't think they have the assortments anymore, which is really sad. So if you want to get an assortment of resistors, you have to go to radioshack.com. And also I'll point out that I got this tubing. I bought this off of eBay, and I'm gonna describe it in my video when I do my first experiments, my demonstrations, and that's really handy to keep things from getting started, because you put multiple, you can end up putting a bunch of things on a breadboard, and you don't want to get things sorted. It's good at this point to get in the habit of using that. So resistor values you're going to be able to get from Radio Shack at this point. I'm going to use values such as 1.5 volts, which is a single cell, and you can see right here, this thing, and it came from Radio Shack. It's got 8 cells in it, and it's got the little thing on top that you can hook a plug that you use for 9-volt batteries on it. And so you can put that on here, and then I got little wires on the bottom. I started these guys on so I could stick it to my breadboard. And so this is 12 volts right here. Here's one that would be 6 volts because it's got 4 cells in it. 4 times 1.5 is 6. And of course you got your 9-volt battery. And actually inside of this thing is 6 1.5 volt cells in series. So that's how you get 9 volts. So I'm going to work in multiples of 1.5. Pretty much from now on. Yeah, I'm going to deviate from time to time. But I want you to take what I do on this board and build it on your breadboard. If you use the values that I'm using beyond this, but once I get going, you can take the values that I use with quarter-watt resistors, voltages that I got, and you want to worry about smoking things on your breadboard. Because if you got too low of a resistance, that current's going to get huge. And, you'll either have your battery popping or your resistor blowing smoke and maybe even a flame. I've done that before. So let's move on forward. So here we go with our irrational thing because the resistance is so low. Well, we're going to change this from 1 ohm to 1.5 ohms. Alright, so we're going to change this from 1 ohm to 1.5 ohms. And you got a fraction here. So if you got the same thing on top and bottom, well, that equals 1. And you got 1 amp. So what you can see clearly is that if you increase the resistance, the current goes down. If you decrease the resistance, the current goes up. If you increase the voltage, the current goes up. Decrease the voltage, and the current goes down. So the way that people state that is that the current is linearly dependent on the voltage. The current is inversely proportional to the resistance. So there you go. Let's move on. Now, here's one that you can actually build. And not worry about frying. And this is going to use a 12 volt stack of batteries here. And when you describe a battery schematically, you're going to use multiple of the symbols of the cell. Now, I could put 8 of them and have this big stack. No, let's use two of the cell symbols together, and you're good to go. Everybody's going to understand what you got. So this is 12 volts. And what you can also notice is that you're going to name individual components. So let's call this B1. And let's call this R1. And this is 1 kilo ohm. So we're going to measure the current. And now I want to point out that if you're going to measure voltage, you get your voltmeter. And you connect it there and there. So you read voltage across the components. When you read current, you've got to actually break the circuit and put your ammeter in there. Because just like if you try to figure out how much water is flowing through a pipe, you got to measure the water. You got to put that measuring device inside that pipe. You measure pressure, you can just drill a little hole and have that gauge on there, and it's going to measure pressure okay. So, and another thing I want to point out, that if you're going to measure the voltage in an experiment like this, where you put an ammeter, you're going to want to measure it right there. That's where you're going to want to measure it, because you are going to have voltage dropping across that, that ammeter. So if you're actually analyzing this component, that's what you're going to do. That's just a little helpful hint. So what we have the current equals the voltage over the resistance, and that equals 12 volts over 1,000 ohms. So 1 kilo ohm is 1,000 ohms. In fact, we would normally express it as 1K. 1 kilo ohm, 1K. You know, because you don't want to have a lot of schematic space, board space, you know, used up by a lot of zeros, and it's not fun to count them either. And what does that equal? Well, that equals 0.012 amp. All right, so we look at this. We've got 12 thousandths of an amp. So that is equal to 12 milliamps. And that's how we put it, the little M and A. So it's 12 thousandths of an amp. So 1 milliamp is 1/1000th of an amp. Pretty straightforward. So, what about if we take and change this around a little bit? We bring it up to 100 kilo ohms. 100 kilo ohms. No ohm here, this is K. Alright, so back to what we want. The current equals the voltage over the resistance, and that equals 12 over 100,000. Now what we end up with is 0. You're going to end up with, when you calculate it, 3 zeros, and then 1, 2. So this is your milliamps, and this here is your microamps. So that equals to 120 microamps. Because you imagine there's another zero right there to complete out your microamp level. So it's that simple. So I'm gonna leave it at that with Ohm's law. The next video is going to be series circuits, and I'll introduce you to a really challenging mathematical concept called addition. So yeah, most of y'all are not going to find this very challenging, but it's necessary. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.